Okay, great. Well, thank you for the generous introduction, Naden. It's nice to be here with all of you today and to talk to you about what the future holds for you folks as you move from organizing into collective bargaining. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to walk you through the broad strokes of what the different steps are in the negotiation process, and then I think Alex has a few words to say, but I'm really looking forward to having a discussion with you folks, and we are a relatively small group. I think small enough on Zoom that we could have some good interaction. So I hope you'll feel free. I know you've been asked to hold your questions to the end, but please do make a note of them. It would be great to hear from you. No bad questions. I mean, collective bargaining, despite the fact that it's a process that many folks in this country and around the world go through, is still somewhat mystified in the public. And so there's a lot of misunderstandings or just even a lack of knowledge about what it looks like. Although, of course, we all perhaps have that image in our mind of, the two parties across from each other at the table and banging fists on tables, which does sometimes happen. So to start out, after you have organized yourselves and gone to the labor board and you're certified as a bargaining unit, then that's when I have the pleasure of coming in to work with your local, and we get to work right away to talk about what is most important to you. And what that means is really, we call it gathering bargaining input. Basically, it means finding out from your coworkers and yourselves what it is that you want to change about your workplace to make it better. So that's what we start with, and we have a number of ways that we can do that. And I have found with my other academic units that it's good to take a multi-pronged approach. So having conversations face-to-face is wonderful, and hopefully we'll be able to have more of those soon. But it's also nice to try and use other means as well. So, sometimes we'll send out emails and have folks respond to that. We'll make phone calls. We'll hold meetings where we'll have group discussions and gather input that way. Or we'll even send out surveys sometimes online as a way to gather input. So all of those are at our disposal, and it's really up to you and your local, your coworkers and yourselves, what you want that process to look like. So after we've gathered the input, that's when we typically elect a bargaining team. And the bargaining team is 3 representatives, and those representatives are there at the bargaining table with myself as your spokesperson to represent all members of the local. And I'll talk a bit more about member participation. It's not to say that they're the only ones who are at the bargaining table, but they're the ones that are consistently at the bargaining table. So it is important that those folks are elected and that we have that consistency throughout the process. So after we've elected a bargaining team, which is, as I said, typically 3 members and myself, then we start taking a look through the bargaining input and having meetings with members to better understand the input and start to prepare bargaining proposals. So often we'll do this in committees or working groups. We don't necessarily need to do it for every issue, and because in your case we would be negotiating a first collective agreement, there are some articles that are more or less template language. For example, the article on no strikes, no lockouts, it's required by law that we have that article in the collective agreement. There's not generally a lot of discussion that needs to happen, so we wouldn't probably organize a working group around it. But on bigger issues like hours of work or leaves of absence or harassment and discrimination, on these issues, we organize groups to talk about what the proposal will look like and to draft those proposals. So once the proposals are drafted, then they are presented to members, to folks like yourselves, for ratification. So what that means is you have an opportunity to vote on the proposals, and it ensures that the bargaining team knows we're going to the bargaining table with the proposals that address your needs, your priorities. So that's an important step before we start bargaining. Then we go to the bargaining table and start to exchange proposals with the employer. And at that point, generally speaking, we do something called open bargaining. So that's where a practice where any member of the bargaining unit can attend a bargaining session. And so for any of you who may have been involved with other unions, you may or may not be familiar with this, because I would say that it's unfortunately a small number of unions in Canada that actually practice open bargaining, but we are seeing more and more interest in this practice because it is more participatory and it's more democratic, and it allows for better participation of members, which therefore leads to better collective agreements. So with open bargaining, it basically means that every single time your bargaining team has to be at bargaining, they are there, again, as I said, as your representatives. However, any member of the unit can come and attend. And we recognize, sometimes you may be able to attend some sessions and not others. You may be able to attend for part of the day, but not all of the day. So we organize all of that to make it available to members as much as possible. So after we start bargaining, we go back and forth, we talk about the proposals, and we, we do that over a course of many months. Especially with a first collective agreement, it takes quite a long time to get through all the different articles and issues that we need to discuss. So it is a lengthy process, and that's another reason why it's so important that as members, you come and attend bargaining sessions where possible, or working group sessions where possible, because it can be difficult to see why it's taking so long if you're not a part of the process. But when you are, you can see the work that's being done and the progress that's being made. And then after we've done that for several months, ideally, in a best case scenario, we arrive at a tentative agreement with the employer. And then again, we go back to the members and we ask you to ratify the tentative agreement. So again, we ask you to vote for or against the agreement that we've come up with. And if it's passed, then you have your first collective agreement, and away you go. Of course, it doesn't always go that way. So if we aren't able to arrive at a tentative agreement in bargaining, there's a few other courses of action that we will take. So the first usually is conciliation. So with conciliation, we ask for the province to appoint a neutral third party who acts as a mediator between the two parties. And their goal is to try to bring us together to reach an agreement. They have no interest in what the outcome of the agreement is. They're simply there to try to bring the parties closer together. Ideally, that person is helpful and helps us arrive, kind of like stop the deadblocks and moves us forward, and we arrive at a tentative agreement. Again, we have you as members ratify it. If that's not successful, then at that point we start to consider taking some sort of job action. Now, I should say that bargaining is not separate from the activities that we undertake in the workplace to show our support for bargaining proposals. So through the course of bargaining, we'll be having discussions. Every discussion about bargaining is a discussion about also mobilization. And so it's important to recognize that when we're at the point, if we get to a point where we haven't been successful in conciliation and we're considering taking job action of some sort, that we have along the way been taking steps so that we are organized and prepared, and members are aware of what's been going on in bargaining. They've been participating, and as members, you want to see us push the issues that we still have on the table forward. Ultimately, you make the decisions about whether or not an issue is an important one, important enough for us to continue to push the employer on. And so job action can take any number of different, forms. And of course, the strongest form of job action is a strike, and where you withdraw your labor and as a means to put pressure on the employer to settle an agreement. So that's basically where we go. Most collective agreements are resolved in bargaining. Very few actually do require a strike, but it is important to recognize the power that strikes have for union members such as you will soon be. It's important to recognize that power, and of course we keep that in mind as we're bargaining. And if we do decide to take some sort of job action or strike, as I mentioned, then of course through negotiations with that pressure that we've put on the employer, we then arrive at a tentative agreement. And again, it goes to you, the members, to ratify it. So that's generally what the process looks like. And I think I will pass it over to Alex.
Hey, great. That was really great to hear. That's very informative for sure. And can everybody hear me? I just want to make sure that everybody can hear me. Okay, wonderful. So I actually just want to make a couple of comments to dovetail what Erin is mentioning here, talking about. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick with just a document here for everybody to see. And it just goes to show academic work, like workers in the academic sector have come together just like you were doing, and they've done it at all of these work sites across Canada, like top universities, grant paid, not grant paid, staff employees, and they've won some really great benefits. And I just wanted to quickly highlight just a few some really great breakthroughs by some of the workers across Canada. One that I recently learned about was the postdoctoral fellows at Queen's University. They actually took a strike vote. They didn't have to go on strike, but they did take a strike vote and authorized possible job action. And because of that, they were able to win something that was very important to them, which was a $2,000 per child annual benefit, childcare benefit, $2,000 per child. And that is something that the only other group at that university had was the faculty. So the faculty had something like $2,250. But because they were unified and stood together and showed it and were able to demonstrate that unity to their employer, they were able to achieve this. Just moving on, professional development fund at Carleton University. I'm just going to point out paid sick leave at Dalhousie University for postdoctoral fellows who never had that prior to forming a union together. Employer paid childcare fund with subsidies for childcare, family care, vision care at Memorial University. Some of those workers are postdocs and grant paid workers at MUN. Salary top-ups to 100% for parental leave, something that the postdocs at Dalhousie University, some of your coworkers, actually were successful in negotiating at the bargaining table their last round. You don't often see 100% top up, so that's really great.